well audible. I don't know if I need a micro, but probably I do for the streaming. So thank you very much for joining this day, and thank you very much for having invited me as well, to everyone from MedCup. So indeed, what I kind of want to talk about a little bit today is how I went from medicine to consulting. And the reason for that being is because there are quite a lot of medical students actually that I've noticed when I was doing medicine who wanted to do something perhaps not necessarily fully clinical and didn't really fully find how to transition from one to the other. So I hope that I can kind of share some experience on that. Now, for me, this can be very informal, so if it's a conversation, great. So if you have a question, just feel free to interrupt me at any time. That'd be awesome. And the way that I kind of want to structure it is I want to first give you a brief intro about who I am and what I kind of did in my relatively short life, and then maybe go into 5 things. One, why I initially decided to do medicine, given that I left it in the end. Then why I ultimately ended up leaving, how that process was for me, what challenges I faced, and then go into what I'm doing now. That would a bit be the general flow, if that works for everyone. So a little bit about me. So I'm Gaita Janssens, indeed. I'm from Ostende, which is a lovely coastal area. Not really, but anyway. And then I'm now living in Antwerp. And I'm an associate now in McKinsey's Brussels office. I'm doing what they call integrative consulting, which basically means that you do a bit of everything versus being associated to a certain function like healthcare, for example. So that's a bit the general gist. In terms of my career path, I started medicine in about 2011, graduated in 2018. Then I did a short stint at Pharma, at GSK. I understand there are some GSK speakers here today as well, which is really cool. I joined the Future Leaders program, doing first medical affairs, and then afterwards I did something called basically market access and value evidence management, which I'll go into a little bit later as well. And then since about a short half year, I'm now into my current role as an associate. So now, I did some stuff in between, and then maybe starting with why I decided to ultimately go into medicine, given that I then decided on leaving it. I guess for me, I had very generic motivations. I was pretty good at the biology, I was pretty good at the maths and the sciences, and then one of the things that pop up then to do is obviously medicine. And then also I was quite interested in, and some biology in general, and this I also have to add, medicine, of course, is something in which you can really help people and in which you can really make an impact. So that obviously is one of the things that will pop up as a great career choice. Now, at the time, Dr. House was also running on TV, and to be fully fair with you, that was, a bit of a motivation as well, because I really was into the guy. So I then decided to start medicine, but as you probably can extract from my story, those aren't really the great motivations from someone who is, very hard into medicine. What you should ideally hear from me, if I were to continue with my medical path, would have been, I really wanted to help people and, take away their pain. That would have been the ideal motivation to have, I think. I actually read also a study when I was learning for psychology that the people who do best in medicine are those who, not the smartest people, well, obviously are very smart, but the best predictor of medical success was simply your inherent desire to help people, which I do think to a large degree is still true. So then I started medicine, and in the beginning I really enjoyed it. I had my bachelor, it was great, a lot of biology, a lot of sciences, and I was really into it because it was basically a prolongation of what I had been seeing in my medical, in my high school education. But then the master came, and here things started to become a bit dubious for me, and I hope that if someone's listening with the same kind of sentiments, no worries, it can all turn out great in the end, hopefully, as well. So what the sentiment was that I was kind of getting is I was having a bit of a constant existential crisis almost for, I think every 6 weeks I would have one of these things. And I couldn't quite figure out what the problem was. Why am I not super excited about my medical studies right now? Because I love the bachelor, but now in the master it's a bit different. And the reason for that really was that as soon as the master hits, it becomes much more practical. I don't know how many of you are medical students, but it becomes very practical. And then you typically see two kinds of people. Person one really enjoys it, really sees the benefit of all that education on how that will ultimately translate clinically. And then the other pool, they think, I want to go back to my hard sciences a little bit. And I fell into bucket two. I wanted more the theoretical stuff behind it, the vague, the abstract. I kind of like that. I was into that. But a lot of other people, they were just super excited by what they were learning in the master. And that's when I started to kind of figure out what other options exist for me. And then I started speaking to people, look, I don't know if this is the right path for me down the line. Is there other stuff that I can do? And that's when you get a lot of weird responses, because typically people in medicine want you to do medicine, and they are very passionate about doing medicine as well. So they don't fully get why someone would want to leave almost as well. And the responses I got was more like, oh, you want to leave a little bit? Why? It's such a great career path. It pays well. It has a lot of societal admiration. You can generate a lot of impact. It's very interesting. And none of those things are wrong. It's all true. And yet, I couldn't really kind of put my finger on the thing of why I wanted to leave. But I did, and it's simply because if I looked into the books that I had in my house, of all the stuff that I really wanted to read, I wouldn't buy medical books out of my personal interest. I would just buy economics books or stuff of that nature, and that's kind of where my natural tendencies flew to. And then there were a lot of other reasons, perhaps which we shouldn't go into now, but of why I wanted to try something else. I wanted to explore the world a little bit more. I wanted to learn how economics and finance works, how a company works, and see if I could contribute meaningfully to that. So, but then a little nuance here. It's not very easy to leave medicine once you're in, due to 3 big reasons. And again, I don't know how far you are in your career. I don't know if you even have thought about ever not doing medicine. But there is a golden cage phenomenon, because you do have a great salary, great remuneration, great respect. So it's difficult to leave that behind for something that wouldn't necessarily work out, because an MD who's not doing MD, the wealth of opportunities aren't that massive necessarily, kind of have to force it a bit. So that's one thing. And then also it's a bit of a network effect, because all your friends will probably be medical students, and they will try to kind of, reinforce the idea that medicine is where you will find the greatest career, which often, which I found within my friends at least, that's kind of what they were doing. And then there's a bit of a competency gap, because you have to spend so much time studying medicine that will be most of what you know, especially as a student. If you're a bit older, of course, and you will, or maybe if you're super interested, you will have more knowledge to share, or more knowledge that you will accumulate in other ways. But most of what you will do due to your studies will be purely medical focused, obviously. So it wasn't hard for me, or it was very hard for me to kind of make that initial step. But then once I did, I found great opportunities elsewhere. And medicine is a wonderful career, but you really need to feel it, I think. You really need to do it with heart and soul. If you don't do it with heart and soul, I think it may be interesting to explore other things in life. Just to give it a go before feeling that you are stuck to a career path, I think. So then, after that, I was thinking, okay, what else can I do? And then I had a couple of options. Then we were into research. Research is always one of the things that pop up. An MD that does new medicine can always do research. Another thing is industry, pharmaceutical industry, and that's what I did. I did a Future Leaders program at GSK, and that was split up into 2 segments. One was the medical affairs segment, which was in a way very much related to medicine still. which is why I didn't really feel like I had fully left the field. I was just like in the field, but approaching it from a different angle, if you will. And then my second segment within that rotation was, or within that job, I guess, was then the thing I spoke about in the beginning, market access and value evidence. And I think that there will be people who will speak about that today as well. But that I thought was extremely cool. That was the first time that I really felt, wow, a job can be absolutely awesome and amazing. Because what I was doing most of the time then is I was trying to figure out, okay, what does a clinical trial need in terms of supplemental evidence, so that even if the trial goes well, it will be accepted at the end of the road by regulatory authorities, by, you know, recommending bodies, so that the vaccine will be legally approved and will be well accepted, and the uptake will be as you would expect it to be. And that I thought was extremely cool. I learned Excel analysis, I learned PowerPoint, and that I, you know, never used in medicine. But because I was so into that way of thinking, I thought, okay, let's just take it a step further and go into consulting, which I had actually already been thinking about for a long time during my medical studies as well. And so then I started a preparation process and ultimately ended up in consulting. But here, you know, again, coming from a medical background, it takes quite a lot of preparation to transition from one to the next. So if you're thinking about that, you will have to spend a lot of time on your own, really learning about what is it that, or you know, what is it that makes a company tick. A new way of thinking is also what you will need. And you will need to learn how to problem solve in a structured and in a systemic way. And all those things are things that you can somewhat learn through medicine, but not really fully, because it's in a completely different context. So yeah, that ultimately ended up going quite well. And now here we are in McKinsey. And what I do now is, I think, very different from what I was doing in medicine, obviously. Now during my first 6 months, I've mainly been working in what we call CPG companies. So this is companies that do consumer packaged goods, like what you sell to a coloré, to the laser. None of that has to do with anything medicine related, but yet you kind of learn on the job how you should do that, how you should approach that problem. And that's kind of what I liked about consulting, that you can just be put into any different kind of function, any different kind of industry, and kind of contribute meaningfully in that way. Which is again different from medicine, because there you build a core experience and become very, very good at that. Whilst here you are more generalist in the sense that you are very, very broad in the skill set that you develop, but then the plus side of that is that you are able to apply it to many different areas. Now, one thing that I did really took away from medicine that I can really apply here is, I think, the ability to connect with clients, because as a doctor, you need to connect with patients and you need to establish a certain credibility quickly, whilst, you know, obviously you need to also have a bit of a personal connection almost with the client or with the patient that you are treating, so that they buy into what you're saying and that they actually want to do it. And the skills that I learned in medicine were really transferable to what I'm doing now. So that was actually a bit of a lay of the land of what I've done, why I did it, why I decided to transition from one to the next. And as I was hoping to make this a bit of a conversation, I'd like to ask you if you had any questions about that, or if any one of you is thinking about transitioning from one to the next, or if not. No one here is. Are you all medical students, by the way? All medical students, all dedicated and convinced. Lovely. Then I'm in the wrong room. No, great. Okay. So that would be mostly it for me, except if you don't have any other questions.
what was the goal of McKinsey of taking somebody on board who has not had the normal previous education of people that they attract into their business? What was their motivation to do that? Do you have any clue on that? And do they have any specific goals with you to go more into a field of hospitals, of whatever, with people like you? Or can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, so that was exactly what I was asking as well. Why would they want me during my recruitment process? And the thing is, generally looking for people who think in a certain way, and that basically means people who are able to dissect the problem and kind of build a certain systematic way of solving that problem, and then, you know, are analytical, etc. And that you don't really need a clear education for necessarily, because the problems that you will come across are, you know, very varied, from how to reduce forest fires to what I said now, how to optimize sales of a consumer packaged good companies to a Colgate, etc. And what they always say is, as long as you have that structured problem-solving approach, then you can apply that to anything. You will still need expertise, obviously, from people, because you are lacking that, but that's why you have a partner on the project, that's why you have experienced consultants there to help you as well. But that problem-solving mechanic is what they were really looking for in not someone like me particularly, but just in anyone. And then they are less interested in what your background is really. It's just as long as you can demonstrate that that is there, then they kind of then consulting could be a good fit. And then what they have in mind specifically for me, McKinsey is always, or is also very open in what you want to do with your career and how you want to build it. So I could, for example, if I wanted to, do a hospital consulting or do pharmaceutical consulting and stick to that, which is ultimately also what I would like to do further down the line, because then I can leverage my background indeed. But, you know, if I want to do mining, if I want to stay in the consumer packaged good thing, then I can. Because you build, as they call, the basic toolkit of how to solve any problem. That's kind of the main goal of the first years. And then in the later years, you build, whilst you're doing all that, the expertise of the industry. And in contrast to medicine, obviously, you know, because it takes a long time to become, you're a medical doctor, it takes a long time to become a full-blown specialist. Whilst here, the, let's say, entry requires less knowledge and requires more just that systematic problem solving thinking. And then you can build expertise whilst you're already in there, I think. That would be it. Does that answer your question, generally? Great. So great.
Thank you.
So you interested yourself to the problem-solving case by yourself within the pharmaceutical optional theme that you took at university, and after that, is McKinsey contacting you, or did you contact McKinsey by yourself? Because I don't understand how you can really pass from medical studies to the McKinsey recruiting program. That's something I didn't quite could understand in your presentation. Sorry.
Thank you. So the first question, if I understood well, is if I built an analytical problem-solving toolkit whilst I was doing my medical studies. Was that question one? Okay. So that's indeed, so what I liked to do during my medical studies and during just, you know, I meant during the time that I was doing medical studies, is like to think in the vague and abstract. So I liked to think about these broad things and come up with strategies of how to implement it without necessarily implementing it myself. That I get less fun out of. And so I started, because medicine is quite practical in a sense. It's a lot of implementation, which is where the impact lies ultimately. But I was looking for that other part, the more vague and abstract thinking and how to do that. So I indeed searched myself for, okay, what jobs do exist for people with a medical degree who aren't pursuing medicine further, who like to do that kind of problem-solving thinking. And that's how I ultimately ended up in consulting, which is always one of the options that you will find if you Google, you know, jobs for medical people without necessarily wanting to do medicine further. And then you will come across a couple of companies, and McKinsey, Bain, and BCG are typically the three that you will also always hear. There are many, many other firms as well, but those three will always be in there somewhere. And I had a personal preference for McKinsey because of the scope of projects that they do, because of the fact that it's the oldest as well, and because of the fact that I have, and this is where I get to how did I come in contact with McKinsey, I had done a weekend with them, because what McKinsey does is they give you opportunities to spend a weekend with some of their trained consultants, and they call that an Explore workshop. And you need to apply for such a workshop, and you need to send in your resume, a motivation letter of why you want to be there, why consulting is for you. And then you can go on a problem-solving weekend, basically, in which you are in a cool location with cool people, and also a very cool challenge that you can crack. And I really, really, really enjoyed that, cracking that case. And ever since I was kind of hooked on it, and I really wanted to dive deeper into it. And then for the actual application process itself, I just applied, and that was it. The normal people that they will proactively recruit in Belgium up until now have been business engineering students and have been typical engineering students, because those are the kind of people who have that that core analytics somewhat more in general, and those are the kind of people, you know, who have the mathematical ability and mathematical skills in a proven way, so that it could be useful in consulting. I was speaking actually a while back about potentially expanding that to other educations as well, to other classes or studies, but medicine was one of them. But generally at the time, the traction wasn't really high. The percentage who wanted to migrate from one to the other wasn't that high at that time. Now, potentially with the initiatives like this, I hope that perhaps the hidden percentages amongst that population can also be exposed, and perhaps that would make more sense to do. But yeah, that's kind of how I went from one to the other. If I look within my own year, for example, I now know 3 people who migrated to consulting, and then 2 more who are doing PhDs or research or something of the kind. So that's ultimately like a pool of I mean, only doing research without clinical practice associated. So that's probably about 5 to 10 people in total, which isn't that much out of a year of 400. So, yeah, I hope that, great.